Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2018 movie titled 12 Strong. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. The film opens on September 11, 2001, a day marked by tragedy as terrorists launched a devastating attack on the Twin Towers in the United States, resulting in nearly 3,000 fatalities and over 10,000 injuries. In response to this horrific event, on October 7 of the same year, the United States initiated military operations against the Taliban regime. Central to this narrative is an elite team of 12 Green Berets, who serve as the film's primary characters. The Green Berets are a distinguished special operations unit of the U.S. Army, renowned for their expertise in reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. At the time of the attacks, Captain Mitch Nelson was on family leave. Driven by a sense of duty, he sought permission from his commander to assemble a team to confront the terrorists. Initially, the commander hesitated, doubting Nelson's readiness due to his youth. However, the deputy captain, with years of experience, advocated for Nelson, recognizing his exceptional talent and potential. This endorsement swayed the commander, who ultimately approved their mission. By October 16, the team arrived at a military base near the Afghan border, where they joined several other units awaiting orders. To serve as the vanguard against terrorist forces, they needed to persuade the base commander of their strategy. While Osama bin Laden had orchestrated attacks against the U.S., it was crucial to understand that the Taliban was the underlying force enabling these threats. Nelson believed that capturing the city of Mazar would significantly undermine both bin Laden and the Taliban's influence. However, the commander cautioned that this objective was only partially correct. General Dostum, an Afghan leader of the Northern Coalition forces, would be responsible for taking the city. Despite being adversaries of the Taliban, General Dostum's forces were considerably weaker. Thus, the mission for the 12 Special Forces operatives was to forge an alliance with General Dostum, integrate into his militia, and collaboratively dismantle the Taliban's power. Nelson confidently asserted that they could complete this mission within 3 weeks. The commander countered that such a timeline was unrealistic. Nelson explained that as winter approached in November, snow would obstruct all escape routes, making it imperative to capture Mazar before then. After accepting the mission, Nelson briefed his team on the current landscape. General Dostum commanded nearly 200 men alongside various militia groups, while their adversary, the Taliban, boasted a formidable force exceeding 50,000 fighters equipped with modern weaponry. The team members exchanged lighthearted banter, joking about their daunting odds, 1 against 5,000, while playfully alluding to the pervasive sense of danger that surrounded them, even among their own ranks. Yet, beneath the surface of their humor, a palpable anxiety lingered among the rest of the team. One member cautiously inquired whether their flight path had undergone successful testing. In response, Nelson, their leader, revealed that they were the very ones who would be testing it firsthand. As they boarded the Chinook, disbelief washed over them when they learned it could only ascend to an altitude of 3,000 meters. They were perplexed, given that the mountain peaks they would be flying over towered above that height. Concerns about sandstorms and enemy missiles loomed large, prompting them to feel they should be flying at least 6,000 meters high. Nelson, still grappling with doubts about the aircraft's capabilities, announced that they would actually be flying at 7,620 meters. He couldn't shake his apprehension regarding whether his team members would have sufficient oxygen for the journey. The pilot then shared a troubling anecdote. During a previous test flight at this altitude, the co-pilot had experienced hallucinations, mistaking 2 non-functional oxygen masks for usable ones. With 3 planes now airborne, they set their course toward the target city. Suddenly, a fierce sandstorm descended upon them, causing some crew members to succumb to nausea. Despite these challenges, they managed to reach their designated drop zone successfully. Once on the ground, Nelson instructed his team to don night vision goggles and prepare for an ambush while awaiting support from local spies. As they lay in wait, 2 armed figures approached, raising suspicions that they might not be allies. In a tense moment, they readied their ambush but were taken aback when an unexpectedly large group arrived, many armed yet wearing friendly expressions. Nelson quickly shouted that they were all allies. What had seemed like a threat was merely a misunderstanding. After introductions, the spy led them across several mountains to a militia stronghold. Although they shared a common enemy in the Taliban, camaraderie was elusive among the militia groups. There was little warmth or trust between them. The spy explained that there were 3 distinct militia factions, with General Dostum's group being one of them. Tensions ran high. Sometimes, rather than uniting against the Taliban, these factions would clash amongst themselves on the battlefield. Before parting ways, the spy warned Nelson to remain vigilant, as the Taliban had placed a substantial bounty on their heads. The following day brought an unexpected cacophony of gunfire. The task force braced themselves for combat but soon discovered that General Dostum was patrolling on horseback. The shots fired into the air turned out to be a traditional greeting, a reminder of the complexities of their situation and the unpredictable nature of their allies. Despite their lack of ammunition, these individuals displayed remarkable resilience and spirit. However, General Dostum did not greet their arrival with enthusiasm. Mistaking the deputy captain for the commander, he embraced him warmly and ushered him into his home. As both teams gathered around the table, an uncomfortable tension filled the air. Everyone remained on high alert, guns at the ready. Captain Nelson attempted to ease the atmosphere by presenting a bottle of wine to Dostum. Noticing Nelson's youth and apparent inexperience, Dostum questioned why a young man would engage with him. This sparked a moment of hostility, as both sides instinctively aimed their weapons at one another. Thankfully, through the intervention of both Nelson and Dostum, the situation was diffused, at least temporarily. Dostum probed Nelson about the men accompanying him, remarking that they bore the eyes of assassins while questioning Nelson's combat capabilities. In response, Nelson confidently asserted that if Dostum wished to witness his skills firsthand, he need only lead him to the Taliban, where he would prove his worth. Intrigued, Dostum decided to test this young leader's ability to command a team of 11 seasoned Special Forces operatives. As they ventured out, an absurd scene unfolded. How could the Taliban possess modern tanks while Dostum still rode a horse? It was a surreal juxtaposition. With a group of 12 but only 6 horses available, Nelson had to divide them into 2 units for reconnaissance. Meanwhile, Dostum, ever cautious, opted to keep some members as potential hostages, fearing they might be spies. In a nearby village, a terrorist leader held several civilians captive, including 3 children. He feigned kindness as he wiped away their tears and engaged them with questions about animals. When he asked which animal had the longest neck, a trembling child answered giraffe. The leader praised the child for his honesty but then cruelly demanded the second child solve a math problem, 15 times 8. The child hesitated, but the third child confidently answered 120, earning her praise as well. In a chilling display of power, the leader then ripped off the headscarf of the teacher kneeling before them and shot her dead, eliciting cheers from the rebels. His brutal rule forbade girls over 8 years old from attending school. Meanwhile, General Dostum led Captain Nelson across the rugged mountains. By afternoon, they arrived at Kobaki Cave, where the high terrain disrupted their communication equipment. The team members exchanged uneasy glances, concerned that the old general might be playing tricks on them. Just then, Dostum emerged from the cave with a fierce determination in his eyes, announcing that they would seek revenge on the Taliban the following day. The following morning, they approached a village under Taliban control, situated 45 kilometers south of Mazar. From their vantage point, Dostum instructed Nelson to notify the U.S. military to carry out an airstrike on the location. Nelson hesitated, concerned that the distance would compromise the precision of the bombing. However, Dostum was apprehensive. He feared that getting too close could result in American casualties, which might prompt a withdrawal from the conflict and spell disaster for his own position. Reluctantly, Nelson relayed the coordinates to the base. The fighter jets, always on standby, swiftly executed the order and unleashed their payload on the village. While Dostum's men erupted in celebration at the sight of the explosions, Nelson remained troubled. The bombing had failed to hit its intended target due to inaccurate coordinates. Frustration mounted as he resolved to get closer to ascertain the precise location of the enemy. Concerned for Nelson's safety, Dostum dispatched a support team to accompany him. As Nelson prepared to report the coordinates again, a sudden attack by the terrorists erupted. Fortunately, he found temporary cover behind a rock, while below him, heavily armed militants appeared poised for confrontation. Thanks to the collective efforts of his team, they were able to accurately pinpoint the terrorists' location. The bombers returned and, this time armed with correct coordinates, struck their target with devastating effect on the Taliban forces. Eager to capitalize on their success and pursue the next objective, Nelson pressed forward, but Dostum intervened. The next village lay within his former territory, and he still had family there. Witnessing the destructive power of the American military, he hoped his relatives might find a way to escape the looming threat. In an unexpected turn of events, a supply drop intended for their small unit was intercepted by locals who then sold it back to American soldiers. Amidst this chaotic scene, a young boy persistently followed Ben, even intruding upon his privacy during a moment of vulnerability. Feeling uncomfortable, Ben reported this to the deputy captain, who, drawing from his extensive experience, warned him that if anyone were killed during their mission, Dostum would hold that person accountable and execute them along with their entire family. This grim reality stirred sympathy in Ben for the boy, prompting him to offer a lollipop, a rare and precious treat in Afghanistan, as a gesture of goodwill. Despite deeming the raid ineffective, the U.S. military decided to send another task force to negotiate with a different warlord. The following dawn found Dostum and Nelson's team assembled atop a mountain. A local boy approached Nelson with a respectful greeting, and he returned the gesture with a warm smile, bridging the gap between two worlds amidst the chaos of war. Nelson inquired of Dostum why he chose to ride horses that day, considering the ominous sound of bombs that could easily frighten them into bolting. Dostum confidently explained that the horses had learned to recognize American bombs and, as a result, remained calm. Intrigued, Nelson pondered how the horses could distinguish the origin of the explosives. In a show of strength, they unleashed firepower to create a second explosion, sending the Taliban into a frenzied retreat. Seizing the moment, Dostum commanded his entire army to advance, exploiting the chaos to launch an offensive. Some Taliban fighters raised their weapons in surrender, but Dostum executed them without hesitation. He then directed his soldiers and horses into the villages, determined to eradicate every terrorist presence. As Nelson stood atop the mountain surveying the battlefield, he spotted enemy tanks providing support to the Taliban forces. He quickly called for air support, only to be informed that assistance was unavailable. In a race against time, special forces rushed down to prevent Dostum's army from charging into a deadly ambush. Thanks to Nelson's swift intervention, Dostum narrowly escaped with his life. However, as the support team began their retreat, Nelson was struck by the sight of the young boy who had greeted him earlier, now lifeless on the ground. There was no time for mourning, they had to withdraw quickly, though Dostum still suffered losses among his troops. That evening, Dostum revealed that the Taliban were using the Tangi Pass to transport weapons, the sole route into Mazar city. Although he was aware of their supply route, he had not anticipated the scale of their armament. That night, Nelson reached out to his deputy, informing him that the entire squad would regroup to prepare for the next assault. His deputy, however, was elderly and unable to endure horseback riding. Dostum shook his head disapprovingly at this. On the third day, Nelson orchestrated another attack. To his surprise, the rebels displayed remarkable cunning, concealing themselves and preparing to snipe from the underbrush while remaining utterly silent. Unbeknownst to Nelson, danger was closing in. Although the deputy commander had observed the unfolding situation from above, he had yet to relay this critical information, leaving the army unprepared. In a moment of peril, Nelson managed to escape from imminent danger and took cover behind a wall to return fire. Meanwhile, Dostum charged ahead recklessly, unwilling to let such a prime opportunity slip away. Recognizing he could not abandon Dostum in this critical moment, Nelson ordered his team to provide continued support. Amidst the fierce combat, Nelson seized a grenade and hurled it into the fray. Despite the dire circumstances, the rebels remained resolute in their refusal to surrender. With sniper support from above, Dostum's forces pressed forward with unwavering determination. Armed only with an M4 rifle, Nelson fought valiantly through a relentless barrage of bombs and bullets, embodying courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Dostum seized an anti-tank gun and unleashed a powerful shot directly at the Taliban's artillery, creating a crucial opening for his forces to safely withdraw from the battlefield. With determination, Nelson finally succeeded in capturing the village, and in a moment of levity, he teased Dostum that if he kept following him so closely, he might not survive for long. This prompted Dostum to reminisce about his time in command of the area when children received an education and had enough food to eat. Their next objective was to strike at the heart of the terrorist group's headquarters, but to do so, they needed to navigate a perilous narrow mountain path that was prone to ambushes. On the 16th day of their campaign, they successfully dismantled several outposts along Tangi Pass, bringing them closer to Mazar city. However, during this critical moment, the deputy captain alerted them that another special forces team had made contact with Lord Atta, a rival of General Dostum, and was en route to join them. Furious at the prospect of becoming a pawn for another lord, Dostum resolved to terminate their cooperation and withdraw immediately. This left the 12 special forces operatives to rely solely on their skills to complete the mission. Failure was not an option, as it would allow the terrorists to continue their assaults on the United States. The team leader quickly divided the special forces into smaller groups to lie in ambush within a high canyon. As the team leader and another operative made their way to an observation point, they were spotted by a terrorist scout. Fortunately, a sniper positioned on the southern flank had eyes on the scout's location. With precision, he adjusted his aim and delivered a fatal shot, neutralizing the threat. Just then, Charlie's squad arrived on the northern flank and set up a radio station to establish communication with the bombers. With everyone now in position, a tense 1-on-5 standoff loomed as all of the Taliban's elite forces gathered in that canyon. The team leader ordered a laser scan to pinpoint the terrorists' coordinates and relayed this information accurately to the bomber aircraft above. The ensuing airstrikes transformed the canyon into a perilous battleground. Following the initial bombardment, Special Forces observers continued to search for new targets. Suddenly, a group of terrorists emerged before the deputy captain. Some raised white flags. The special forces were left in a state of uncertainty. Were they seeking to surrender or preparing for an attack? They could only shout warnings for them to halt as tensions escalated with each step closer the enemy took. The overwhelming number of adversaries began to encircle them, intensifying the precarious situation. However, the enemy refrained from taking any significant action, leading the Eastern Special Forces to grow complacent and let their guard down. At that critical moment, a terrorist detonated a bomb strapped to his body, inflicting injuries on the Eastern Special Forces. When they regained consciousness, they found the deputy captain gravely wounded. The team immediately called for an ambulance to evacuate him. It became apparent that the enemy might have discovered their observation posts, as both the southern and northern flanks were under heavy bombardment. The antennas responsible for communication with the bombers were destroyed, further complicating their situation. In a moment of desperation, a courageous team member dashed to retrieve the fallen antenna and spotted a Soviet 122mm self-propelled multiple rocket launcher nearby. After some time, they finally managed to re-establish contact. In this dire moment, Dostum rallied his troops to support Nelson, who was under relentless artillery fire, with 40 rounds raining down in quick succession and causing significant damage. If Nelson could not neutralize the artillery, the terrorist leader would have a clear path to escape. Seizing the opportunity presented by the enemy's reloading time, Nelson resolved to launch a direct assault. Despite his vigorous efforts, he found the Taliban forces overwhelming, their numbers akin to swarming ants, rendering his bullets largely ineffective. Meanwhile, the rebel leader confidently ordered his comrades to reload the artillery, assured of their numerical advantage. The crew, feeling the pressure of the enemy's aggression, called in bombers for support. However, the proximity of their own forces posed a risk of friendly fire. Nelson recognized a critical vulnerability: the enemy could only fire 40 rounds before needing time to reload. If they could strike during this window, they stood a strong chance of success. As tensions escalated, Nelson swiftly led the charge forward, his main forces following closely behind into battle. Aware that this could result in heavy casualties, they understood they had only about 2 minutes to act. Seizing the moment, Nelson mounted his horse and rode into the thick of enemy fire, his comrades and militia rallying behind him with fearless determination to engage and obliterate the enemy. In a dramatic turn of events, one team member spotted an enemy vehicle barreling toward him and fired a shot that sent it flipping over, marking a pivotal moment in their struggle. At that moment, the cannon was fully loaded once more and unleashed a barrage of attacks. However, its effectiveness was severely hampered by the close proximity of enemy forces, leading to a swift depletion of ammunition. Just as Nelson prepared to issue the order to neutralize the cannon, an explosion struck him, knocking him to the ground in a daze. The enemy aimed for a surprise assault, but in a twist of fate, they found themselves counterattacked. This time, retreat was not an option for the Taliban. Dostum had boldly advanced his troops into enemy territory, while the gunboat remained unarmed. In a desperate move, the terrorists deployed a tank to obstruct their advance, momentarily stalling the militia's progress. Underestimating Nelson's resolve proved to be a grave mistake for the terrorists. With a few well-placed shots, he eliminated the mortar operator and swiftly moved toward the 2 artillery pieces. A suicide bomber hurled a grenade in his direction, but fortune favored Nelson as he narrowly avoided the blast. Recognizing the dire situation, the Taliban leader made a hasty escape, only to drive directly into his own bomb nest, immobilizing his vehicle and sealing his fate at the hands of Dostum. In the aftermath, Nelson triumphantly declared their victory. He confided in his deputy about his desire for a safe return, and they quickly boarded an ambulance helicopter for extraction. Yet, the situation was far from resolved. Another general had arrived in Mazar City earlier, prompting General Dostum to seek justice amidst the chaos. Many anticipated a bloody confrontation, but what unfolded was unexpected. Dostum extended his hand to his adversary, ceding control of the city to General Atta. Nelson commended Dostum for his astute decision, but Dostum replied with a somber reflection: there were no easy choices in Afghanistan, a land where empires have met their demise. Today we may be allies, he mused, but tomorrow could bring conflict. Just wait, the United States will also become a new power here. If you withdraw, it is seen as cowardice; if you remain, you risk enmity. Yet none of that matters, you will always be my brothers. This story concludes here, highlighting the resilience of these 12 Special Forces operatives as they navigated immense challenges during their mission. Imprisoned for days and facing countless adversities, they ultimately achieved a remarkable withdrawal in just 3 weeks, an operation that many military experts believe typically spans 2 years. The central figure depicted in this narrative is indeed Dostum, who ascended to the role of Vice President of Afghanistan in 2014 and has been a steadfast ally of Nelson since 2012. A statue of a Green Beret on horseback stands at the One World Trade Center, symbolizing the emergence of heroes amid historical turmoil. Ultimately, no one desires war, it is often innocent civilians who bear the greatest burden. Thank you for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.